This channel is not designed for entertainment or viral content. It exists for people who are actively healing, seeking clarity, or exploring the psychology behind their emotions and patterns. Every episode is carefully written and produced with emotional depth, reflection, and care. If you're here expecting casual commentary, high-energy hosts, or non-AI content as you think we are, then we gently refer you to other channels offering just that, often covering topics like how to get a girlfriend or what to do when the world is falling apart as mental health content. At Deep Dive, our work is different. It's quiet, deep, and intentionally crafted to support those on a real mental health journey. If that's you, then welcome to our channel. You're in the right place.
Welcome to Deep Dive Podcast channel. We're diving into something today that feels, well, incredibly counterintuitive. We're raised to believe that being nice is pretty much the highest virtue, right? It's polite, it smooths things over, it feels safe.
Yeah, it's deeply ingrained.
But what if that automatic drive to be nice isn't always kind? What if sometimes it actually holds us back, prevents genuine connection, and even harms us in subtle ways?
That's exactly the fascinating paradox we're exploring today. We're digging into some insights that make a really crucial distinction here.
Okay.
It's the difference between genuine kindness, which is rooted in things like empathy, courage, authenticity, and a kind of chronic niceness, which is also more of a performance, driven by fear.
Okay. It's like one comes from strength maybe, and the other comes from a sense of vulnerability or threat.
Precisely. And our mission for this deep dive is to really unpack how this pattern of chronic niceness can quietly sabotage our relationships, maybe chip away at our confidence, and keep us from knowing what we truly think or feel.
And then, of course, explore what it takes to shift towards a way of relating that's much more authentic.
Exactly. Because while performing niceness might feel like the safest option in the moment, like you're staying hidden behind this perfectly pleasant facade, the sources we looked at highlight the very real cost it takes over time.
Okay, let's start right there then.
Yeah.
When we talk about being too nice in this problematic way, what exactly do we mean? How is it different from just being a genuinely good person?
It's a really important distinction, and we're absolutely not talking about basic courtesy, right? Or being considerate or feeling genuine empathy for others. Those are like foundational.
Sure, essential.
What the sources describe as problematic niceness is different. It's more of a coping strategy.
Coping strategy.
Yeah. It's driven by a need to manage how others perceive you, specifically to avoid disapproval or conflict or potential rejection.
Yeah.
It's about prioritizing external harmony, making sure everyone else is comfortable and happy with you, even at the expense of your own internal truth and well-being.
So it's less about contributing positively to someone else's state and maybe more about managing your own anxiety by ensuring you don't rock the boat or make anyone unhappy with you.
Precisely. Kindness, as the insights show, it flows from a place of genuine care and inner security. It can involve difficult truths, setting boundaries, even saying no, but delivered with compassion.
Okay.
Problematic niceness, however, is often driven by fear. Fear of judgment, fear of abandonment, fear that you aren't acceptable if you show up fully or honestly. It's about appeasement and avoidance. Building this reputation for being easygoing or agreeable as a kind of shield.
And the cost of wearing that shield all the time. I mean, it must be exhausting. What are the specific ways this plays out?
It is exhausting, and the costs are significant, even if they're kind of invisible from the outside. Internally, you can end up building this deep well of resentment because your own needs and feelings are constantly being pushed down. You feel disconnected from others because you're not letting them see the real, whole you, flaws, opinions, all of it. There's this emotional fatigue from the constant monitoring and performance.
Right.
And most fundamentally, you lose touch with yourself. You deny your own needs. You silence your own voice, bury your own truths, until maybe you don't even know what they are anymore. It's like you become a supporting character in your own life story.
Wow. That image of becoming invisible in your own relationships, that really hits hard. The sources you've pulled from offer some incredibly specific examples of how this niceness shows up in behaviors that, on the surface look kind or supportive, but are actually detrimental.
Yeah.
There are 5 key ones they highlight.
Yes, these are really common patterns that feel helpful, but often have roots in that fear-based need to keep the peace or just be liked. The first behavior is always trying to cheer people up.
Okay, this feels like the most universally accepted form of being nice, doesn't it? Someone is sad or upset, and your immediate instinct is, okay, make them feel better. What's the issue there?
Well, the intention might be good, sure.
Hmm.
But the source material points out that when this is your only response, or your automatic response, to someone's difficult emotion, whether it's sadness, anger, fear, whatever that, it often signals your own discomfort with their feelings.
Ah.
It's less about supporting them in their feelings and more about trying to get them to stop feeling something that makes you uncomfortable.
So you're trying to fix your discomfort by fixing their mood? Is that it?
Exactly. And imagine being the person on the receiving end. If every time you express sadness or worry, someone immediately tells you to look on the bright side, or minimizes your feelings, or distracts you, well, you start to learn that these feelings aren't acceptable. They're not welcome.
You might shut down.
Right, you might start masking your genuine emotions, feeling pressured to appear okay, or even feeling guilty for not being able to just, cheer up on command. It creates this disconnect because you don't feel truly seen or accepted in those difficult moments.
So instead of feeling supported, you feel misunderstood or maybe like a burden. Okay, that definitely reframes it. What's the alternative suggested here then?
The insight is simple, but pretty profound. Practice emotional presence. Instead of rushing in to fix it, just be there.
Be there.
Listen without judgment. Validate their experience. Simply saying something like, that sounds really hard, or it makes sense that you're feeling that way, or even just, I'm here with you, creates space for their emotions. It allows them to be felt and processed. It's about being a container, not a cleanup crew.
That shift from trying to fix to just trying to be. That feels like a really fundamental change. Okay, what's the second behavior that falls into this too nice trap?
Avoiding conflict at all costs. This looks like seeming incredibly agreeable or easygoing. Rarely voicing a dissenting opinion or pushing back on anything.
And society often praises people like that, right? People who are not dramatic or easy to get along with. Why is total conflict avoidance a problem?
Because conflict, when it's navigated constructively, is actually essential for depth and growth in relationships.
Really?
Yeah, it's how you understand different perspectives, clarify misunderstandings, establish healthy boundaries. When you avoid conflict entirely, you prevent these necessary processes. You might avoid a momentarily uncomfortable conversation, sure, but you sacrifice the possibility of true intimacy, which requires vulnerability and honesty, even when it's difficult.
So the cost is a superficial piece that actually prevents deeper connection.
Absolutely. Unaddressed frustrations. They don't just disappear. They fester beneath that pleasant surface. Misunderstandings pile up. Resentment builds silently. The fear driving this is often that any disagreement is a threat to the relationship itself, like expressing a different view means you'll be rejected, or the relationship is too fragile to handle any tension.
Right.
But relationships that can weather honest disagreement, they're far more resilient and trusting in the long run.
It requires faith, then, that the relationship can handle both people showing up authentically, even with some friction. How do we navigate that instead? What's the suggestion?
The suggestion is to approach difficult conversations from a place of care. Start by affirming the importance of the relationship.
Okay.
You might say something like, this is a little uncomfortable for me, but I care about you and our connection, and I think it's important to be honest about something. Or maybe, my intention here isn't to criticize, but just to share how I'm feeling so we can understand each other better.
Okay.
This signals that your honesty is coming from a place of investment, not attack.
Framing it with care definitely makes it feel much less confrontational. All right, what's the third pattern?
Constantly deferring to others. This looks like always saying whatever you want to do, or I don't care, you choose, what are you thinking, that kind of thing.
This also seems like just being polite, right? Letting the other person have their way, giving them agency.
Again, it can be part of healthy compromise, sure. But when it's constant, when you never voice a preference or opinion of your own, the sources describe it as a form of self-erasure.
Self-erasure.
Yeah. Over time, the relationship becomes imbalanced. The person who always defers starts to feel invisible, like their desires and opinions genuinely don't matter because they're never expressed. And surprisingly, the other person can feel burdened by always having to decide, or even feel like they don't truly know the deferring person because that part of them is just hidden. There's no sense of spontaneous co-creation,
And I imagine the fear here is probably that voicing a preference is selfish or demanding, maybe?
That's exactly the common root, that fear that if I say what I want, I'll be seen as high maintenance or difficult or selfish. But healthy relationships really thrive on mutuality. They're like a dance where both partners contribute their rhythm and direction.
So what's the move here instead?
The practice is simple. Start voicing your preferences, even small ones.
Yeah.
It could be as small as stating which movie you'd prefer to see, or what type of food you're in the mood for, or how you'd like to spend a Saturday afternoon. These small acts build the muscle of asserting your desires. They signal to your partner that you are an active participant with your own thoughts and feelings. It fosters a dynamic of shared decision-making and mutual contribution.
Baby steps in showing up. That makes a lot of sense. What's the fourth pattern of problematic niceness?
Saying what others want to hear. This is the tendency to agree or compliment or affirm simply to gain approval or avoid discomfort, even if it's not genuinely true for you.
Ah, the classic sugarcoating, or telling those little white lies to smooth things over.
Yes, exactly. It's basically a form of emotional dishonesty. It might look like always agreeing with someone's strong opinion, offering exaggerated compliments, or automatically taking their side in a disagreement they're having with someone else, even if you privately think they might be wrong. The immediate win feels like avoiding conflict or getting that positive reinforcement.
But that must have a cost down the line.
A big one, yeah. Authenticity is really the foundation of deep trust. When you constantly say what you think others want to hear, you create this distance between your external presentation and your internal reality.
Right.
The person doing this eventually feels deeply disconnected because their real thoughts are never aired. They might feel resentful at having to suppress their true views or feel unseen because the version of them that everyone seems to like isn't actually them
Yeah.
and the other person. They aren't building trust with you, but with the pleasant facade.
Gosh, it sounds incredibly isolating when you put it like that. How do you shift this one?
The alternative is to practice offering honesty with warmth. This isn't about being brutally blunt or critical, not at all. It's about learning to share your perspective or disagreement while still valuing the other person. You can acknowledge their view first, something like, I hear what you're saying about X, and I understand why you feel that way, before gently offering yours. I see it a bit differently. Or, have you considered why? Being real takes courage, but it's a much deeper form of caring for the relationship than constant agreement.
Honesty wrapped in kindness, a very different thing from just agreeing. Got it. And the fifth way niceness can sabotage connection.
Making someone the center of your world. This is often portrayed romantically, right? In movies and songs, the whole idea that you're all I need.
So devoting all your time, energy, interests,
Yeah.
everything to your partner.
Exactly. When one person's life entirely revolves around the other abandoning their own friends, hobbies, personal goals, even their opinions, sometimes the sources we looked at describe it less as healthy love and more as enmeshment.
Enmeshment. That sounds pretty intense. What's the negative impact there?
Well, for the person doing the revolving, it's a loss of self. They neglect their own needs, their passions, their growth areas, which often leads to feeling empty or resentful over time. And for the person being revolved around, it creates immense pressure. They're burdened with being the sole source of their partner's happiness, social life, sense of purpose. It can feel suffocating. It's just an unsustainable emotional load for one person to carry.
So healthy relationships need space for both individuals to thrive independently as well as together. What's the healthier pattern?
It's recognizing the value of interdependence, not just dependence or complete independence. It involves encouraging both independence and interdependence.
Okay.
It means maintaining and nurturing your own friendships, pursuing your own interests, and supporting your partner in doing the same. A well-rounded partner who has their own vibrant life outside the relationship actually brings more energy, perspective, and fulfillment into the relationship.
Right.
You come together as two whole people, not two halves, trying to complete each other.
Those 5 points really bring home the idea that actions that look superficially nice can actually create distance and imbalance when they stem from fear rather than genuine connection. But why do we fall into these patterns? The source material points to the roots of this too nice programming.
Yeah, this tendency towards chronic niceness or people-pleasing. It's very often a learned behavior, frequently developed as a survival strategy early in life.
A survival strategy in childhood? That sounds pretty serious.
It can be. Think about the environment some children grow up in. Maybe conflict was scary, unpredictable, or even physically unsafe.
Okay.
Maybe expressing your own needs or desires was met with disapproval, criticism, or even shame. Perhaps love and acceptance felt conditional. You only got affection or validation if you were good, quiet, compliant, agreeable. Or maybe disapproval from a parent or caregiver felt like a genuine threat of abandonment.
So being the nice, quiet, agreeable child who didn't cause trouble became the safest way to navigate a potentially unstable or emotionally unsafe environment.
Exactly. It was actually a brilliant coping mechanism in that context.
Mm.
If minimizing yourself and prioritizing others' comfort kept you safe or earned you the affection you needed, you learned that this is how you must be to survive and be accepted.
Right.
The challenge is that these patterns become deeply ingrained habits. And while they might have been adaptive in childhood, they become maladaptive in adult relationships, where intimacy and trust require the very authenticity that people-pleasing suppresses. That old programming just isn't serving you anymore.
It's like using a map from 20 years ago to navigate a city that's completely changed. The old routes just don't work. So how do we start rewriting that old programming? How do we shift from this fear-based niceness to courageous authenticity?
Well, it's definitely a process, and it involves both understanding the roots, like we just discussed, and practicing new behaviors.
Yeah.
You've touched on the core difference. Kindness is courageous and authentic. Problematic niceness is fearful and appeasing. The journey is really about choosing courage more often. Authenticity is, let's be honest, harder in the moment. It requires vulnerability. It might risk upsetting someone, but it's the only path to building lasting, trusting, and truly fulfilling relationships.
Because you're building connection based on who you actually are, not some version you think people will like. The sources give us some practical strategies for making this shift. It sounds like it involves more than just, trying harder.
Absolutely. Since these patterns are often linked to those early safety mechanisms, the body itself can perceive authentic expression as a threat. So a key first step is often to regulate your nervous system.
Ah, okay. The physical reaction.
Yeah. If the thought of conflict or disagreement makes your heart pound, your palms sweat, that's your old programming activating. So before stepping into a potentially uncomfortable, honest conversation, try techniques to calm your system down. This could be deep, slow breathing. Focusing on making your exhale longer than your inhale is really effective. It could be grounding yourself, like feeling your feet on the floor or your body in the chair, or even just placing a hand on your heart or your belly to feel a sense of self-connection and safety.
That makes so much sense. If your body feels safer, your mind can be clearer and more courageous. What else helps?
Start small. You don't need to tackle your biggest, most scary truth first.
Right.
Begin practicing voicing preferences or gentle disagreements in really low-stakes situations. Maybe it's with a friend about where to eat, or with a family member about a minor plan. These small acts build internal confidence. They show your system, gradually, that asserting yourself doesn't automatically lead to catastrophe. It's about building that muscle.
Gradual exposure to the perceived danger.
Okay, yes. And as you start practicing, it can be incredibly helpful to have some honest scripts or go-to phrases ready.
Oh, like prompts.
Exactly. Because when you're feeling anxious, your mind can just go blank. Having phrases ready like, I'm not sure how to say this, but I want to be honest with you. Or, this feels hard for me to bring up, but it's important. Or maybe, I care about your feelings, and I also need to share my perspective.
Yeah.
That can give you language.
Yeah.
And it signals to the other person that your intention is rooted in care and connection, not criticism.
That's a very practical tool. It takes some of the pressure off finding the perfect words in a moment of anxiety.
It does. And finally, and this is perhaps the most important piece, embrace the discomfort as a sign of growth.
Okay.
When you start breaking these old patterns, you will feel uncomfortable. You'll likely feel guilt or anxiety or a sense of being selfish. The sources really emphasize that this discomfort is not a sign you're doing something wrong.
It feels like it, though.
I know. But it's actually a sign that you are actively rewiring those old, deeply ingrained neural pathways and relational habits.
Yeah.
View that feeling of discomfort
Yeah.
as proof that you are making progress, not failing. Lean into it rather than retreating back to the old pattern.
That reframe is incredibly powerful. Instead of, this feels bad, I must be doing it wrong, it's more like, this feels bad because I'm changing, and change is hard.
Exactly. The overall message from the material we reviewed is a deeply freeing one, I think. It's that you don't have to keep shrinking yourself or hiding who you are in the pursuit of being liked or avoiding conflict. You're meant to be whole, to have a voice, and to show up authentically.
And while being real, being authentic definitely takes more courage in the short term than just being agreeable.
The payoff is immeasurable.
Mm-hmm.
It leads to significantly deeper intimacy because you are actually letting yourself be seen and known, truly known. It builds richer, more resilient relationships founded on genuine trust and mutual respect. And perhaps most importantly, it cultivates a stronger, more grounded sense of self, because you are no longer abandoning yourself in the attempt to please everyone else.
It really boils down to that core question the sources leave us with, doesn't it? The one worth sitting with. In my interactions, am I being kind or am I just being nice?
There is truly a world of difference between the two. And recognizing that difference within yourself is the first crucial step toward building relationships and really a life that feel deeply connected, honest, and truly yours.
This deep dive has really illuminated how our ingrained patterns, even those that seem positive on the surface like niceness, can inadvertently create barriers to the very connection we crave. Thank you for exploring this with us today.
It's a powerful invitation, isn't it, to examine our own behaviors and consider what might be possible if we dared to be a little less nice and maybe a lot more real.
We hope this deep dive gives you plenty to reflect on in your own relationships and your own journey towards authenticity. Thank you so much for listening.